All right, here we go. It is as far as I know, I haven't checked the news in several hours. Slow news day on the Texans front, but I was able to catch up on some watching of things, including Greg Cosell on the Ross Tucker podcast, in which he talked about the AFC South specifically for our purposes. He talked about the Houston Texans, so I want to watch that and react to some of those clips. And then also, I watched episode 2 of the Henry To'oTo'o documentary, which I'm rapidly realizing is very much some might call it a recruiting tool for athletes, trying to get them to go to Alabama. It feels a little bit more cultish, which probably explains why Alabama's kind of good. They're pulling people into a cult. But Greg Cosell, NFL Films veteran, been at NFL Films for decades, watches a whole bunch of film. He was on the Ross Tucker podcast and started off talking about the Texans, specifically about Bobby Slowick and his influence on the offense. Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I would think since Slowick came from the 49ers, you're going to see a lot of those principles and concepts. I think they want their run game to be a factor. I think that's one reason they signed Devin Singletary, because he's not going to be the starter. Obviously, Damian Pierce will be, and Pierce has the skill set to be a feature back in this league. But I think they want to run the ball. They want to have more than one back, just like the Niners have always had more than one back, just like Mike McDaniel last year in Miami had more than one back. I think that they want that to be the starting point, and they'll want the play action pass game off of that to be a critical piece of what they do.
Yeah, and like obviously that's not a huge surprise to anybody that's watching this YouTube channel. We know that obviously that's going to be a big deal for the Texans, the run game. The one thing I thought about is Cassell was talking about the running backs. Like obviously you're going to have multiple running backs, but the fullback is the big deal. And I just wanted to check the double check the depth chart double check to Troy Harrison is still there, and Andrew Beck is who they signed from Denver. They've got two fullbacks on the roster right now. Harrison, who's got the blessed versatility, having been a college defensive player, maybe could be used in multiple roles. He hasn't. He didn't. Did he do much last year after he almost got murdered in the one game? Somebody hung him out to get murdered. It was one of the backup quarterbacks, right? Just threw a ball to him and just turn him into like that side of beef that Rocky was going after in Rocky 1. So Troy Harrison, I think he's still alive and out there. They're going to run the ball. They're going to have a fullback. They're going to hopefully be a much better offensive line this year. So Greg knows that. And a lot of this stuff is going to be review for you guys. That's how smart you've all gotten in the ways of Kubshanistan.
You mentioned
so I should tell you what's coming next. John. Oh, okay. Here he is talking about John Mechie.
a number of receivers. One player who I think he got hurt, unfortunately, and he's going to miss some time in the OTAs. And he missed all of last season. I'm very anxious to see John Mechie, because John Mechie, I really liked him coming out of Alabama, and I think he can be a really good NFL receiver. But he's an unknown right now after missing a season, and I think as I said, I think he got injured in OTAs.
Yes, he did get injured in OTAs, a hamstring of some sort. And you know my policy on Mechie. I'm trying to think about the cancer and the recovery from that first and foremost. I'm not going to lie to you, though. I do get excited when I think about the prospect of it. Plus, because I've been watching that Henry To'oTo'o documentary, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid on these kids from Alabama, man. They're tough. They're cut from a different cloth. To'oTo'o makes this sign to show how tight they all are there. Just wait for it. It's very dramatic. So Mechie, who grew up, I don't know if all of you had heard this story. Like it sounded like it was fake at first, but it actually came from him. He's lived in multiple different countries, I believe 3 different continents, but he lived in Ghana when he was younger. And he says he got fast because he had to run from wild dogs in Ghana. And I think he probably would have been fast regardless, but running from wild dogs in Ghana is a pretty badass memory to have as a child. He moved from Canada to the U.S. when he was in high school, I believe on his own, just so he could play a better brand of football. So like the kid wants it, the kid's motivated, and he kind of is cut from the same cloth of a lot of these other guys, whether they're from Alabama or not. The Texans have drafted in these last couple of years. I saw somebody mention Tank Dell and love he's getting. Greg Cosell loves him some Tank Dell as well.
They clearly tried to upgrade their receiver position. Tank Dell is an explosive athlete. He's small but really explosive and sudden. I really like Xavier Hutchinson. He was only a 6th-round pick, which doesn't guarantee that he makes the team. But I really liked his tape at Iowa State.
Yeah, the Xavier Hutchinson is one that I keep reminding myself he's a 6th-round pick because it's fun to watch his highlights, and it's fun to think about the Iowa State dynamic that Brock Purdy went to Iowa State. They run a very similar system to what the Texans are going to be running, or a lot of Kubiak Shanahan principles, and that helped Brock Purdy out really well, obviously. And then Xavier Hutchinson in the same mold as another couple guys the Texans have drafted in the last couple years. Seems like maybe a little bit of a late bloomer, or like in the case of Dameon Pierce was a guy that just was underutilized in college. And it's funny because for a running back, these are the two paradoxes of scouting college players right now. It should be a good thing when a running back is underutilized because there's not as much tread on off his tires, but you also don't have as much film on him. And then with quarterbacks, it's almost a bad thing if you go to a really good college, as we've seen with CJ Stroud. That it's just you've been throwing too many touchdowns to too many good wide receivers. When are you ever going to have a chance to throw to good wide receivers in the NFL? I don't know. So we know the lesson. Don't send your 5-star quarterback son to an awesome college because it'll get bucked you down to number 2 overall. Damn near impoverished at that point. This was interesting. The actual question, according to Greg Cosell, is not the offense. It's something else.
I think this offense could be pretty good. Obviously, it all depends on Stroud. We've talked about him. We don't need to go into all that detail. The big question here is their defense. They don't really have a lot of big-time players on the defensive side of the ball. They need Derek Stingley to be able to play, 17 games. He's a really good corner with great traits.
Okay. Oh, shit, I did it again. Excuse my language.
Pierce will be. And
see what happens here? This is why I have to edit these afterwards. Because I have 4 sips of beer and all of a sudden I lose all motor control.
He's an unknown right now after missing a season. And I think he got injured in OTAs. I think this offense could be pretty good. Obviously, It all depends on Stroud.
The part that he said, I think this offense could be pretty good. I feel like that's a flyby compliment. I don't really see a lot of other people out there saying I think this offense could be good, and then just say, but let's move on to the defensive side of the ball.
We've talked about him. We don't need to go into all that detail. The big question here is their defense. They don't really have a lot of big-time players on the defensive side of the ball. They need Derek Stingley to be able to play, 17 games. He's a really good corner with great traits.
Okay, did you hear that?
Jimmy Ward was a
really good corner with really good traits. I do hear a lot of that about Derek Stingley, is people saying, I like him a lot, but I don't know what the hell the Texans were doing with him last year. And I think there's a tendency, and understandably so, for people to think, they weren't using Derek Stingley as to challenge guys and to really run with them. They were using him a lot of conservative coverages, and perhaps that's because he wasn't able to, where I don't think that was the case. I thought early in the season, Stingley got in trouble sometimes with it being a little too handsy and having to, he has to learn that part of the game, what you can and can't get away with in the NFL compared to college. But I thought he showed a lot of ability in being able to play physical at the line, to bump and run with people, to track guys across the field, and hopefully D'Amico obviously challenges him on that front. As far as what one of you had said, oh yeah, Dylan Horton was the other guy I was thinking about in terms of a late bloomer. So Xavier Hutchinson and Dylan Horton, a couple late bloomers. Henry To'oTo'o, I don't know. I wouldn't call him a late bloomer. I didn't know that's not what you're doing, J-Rock. But late round pick that when we watch some of him a little bit later, I do get excited about him and Christian Harris potentially playing next to each other. Christian Covington, my God. It's a blast from the past.
Really, really good signing for them. Obviously knows
Okay, so he's talking about the Jimmy Ward signing being a really good signing.
the defense inside and out coming from the Niners with D'Amico Ryans. Obviously, they expect Will Anderson to be a factor.
Yeah, Jimmy Ward, I think, is another one that's being under-discussed. I think that Jimmy Ward and Dalton Schultz signings are ones that didn't quite fit people's narrative or mold for what they think of the Texans. So they kind of discount those guys, and it's really weird because I think like some people, including I think I told you guys this morning. No, I said it on the radio this morning. Like Pro Football Focus had Dalton Schultz ranked as, you know, one of the top free agents and should have gotten a contract for 3 years, $45 million or what have you. But as soon as he signs for the Texans for 1 year, he's not that good. And also the Texans should be criticized because they didn't sign anybody to 3-year deals. So I don't get it. I thought he was a good football player, and it would be good to get him at even less guaranteed money on just a 1-year deal. But somehow, no. If they'd signed him over 3 years, $45 million, it would have been the coup of the century. I don't get it. I'm just a simple red hoodie wearing dude. Next up, Greg discusses this. This is where the Christian Harris part comes in. This is where I'm getting excited about Christian Harris.
You know, the player I think who becomes really important in this defense because of the way the Niners played, and I'm not suggesting he's Fred Warner because he's not, but I think Christian Harris at linebacker becomes a really important player in the context of this defense.
Yeah, and he does. If you think about, it's funny. San Francisco has had a couple iterations now going back to Vic Fangio, where their middle linebackers were the key to the defense in a lot of ways. And it's kind of old school thinking, and people forever always want to say, well, linebackers don't matter as much as they used to. But if you go back to when Fangio was there, he had two kind of freakish linebackers and Pat Willis and the other dude, you know what I'm talking about, that really made it a lot easier for the secondary and made it a lot easier for the defensive line because they could cover so much ground. They occupied a huge bubble in the middle of the field because they could cover, they could play the run, they could do a lot of things. And likewise with Fred Warner there in San Francisco now, they have that. Christian Harris has the athletic ability to be able to do that. He showed flashes of it. He just has to tie it all together. And last year, I think when he first got in there, remember, he didn't have training camp at all. He looked a little bit like a newborn deer, just a little bit awkward and kind of awkwardly running across a meadow and every now and then running into something. And he got better as the year went on, but he would just do it in flashes. There were times where he didn't fit in the run game the way he was supposed to sometimes. And then there were other times where he did it incredibly well. So I'm open to Miko for this year, at least being actively involved in the defense. I mean, it gets tricky with a head coach being too involved in the defense or offense. We've seen that before with these guys. One other key to the defense, a guy that kind of got neglected this year because he was injured, but Greg freakishly somehow knows about all 1,500 dudes plus all the rookies and all the draft picks every single year. He's like Rain Man.
You know, Jonathan Grenard was hurt this year, but he had shown flashes of being able to play both outside and inside. And, you know, the 49ers had that guy in each of the last 2 years. 2 years ago was Arden Key. This past year was Charles Omenihu.
I don't know where they're going to pick up a guy like Omenihu. They don't fall to you in the 4th round or whenever we got Omenihu originally. Was Omenihu a 4th or a 5th rounder? But then he was one of the ones that for whatever reason, he was a Mulligetta client. For the people that had conspiracy theories or just suspicions that the Texans wouldn't take CJ Stroud because he was a Mulligetta client, I get it. It makes sense in a lot of ways. But anyway, Omenihu wasn't happy here. He got traded away, and he played really well for the 49ers in doing that, being a guy who was inside or outside. And this is where the Grenard tie-in comes, as I recall.
But I think there'll be many of the same principles for sure, because we know with the Eagles offense that Hurts is
son of a bitch. Excuse my language again. So Grenard is who he's talking about. I want to get to the Eagles thing here. Yeah, Reeder was a 5th rounder. Menahue, 5th rounder. Reeder's come up a lot today. We were talking about players, Houston athletes in general from any sport that you would welcome back with open arms. And DJ Reeder actually got a lot of votes. I wasn't expecting that. DJ Reeder did a really good job of making a name for himself as a nose tackle. And I think he was underappreciated to a certain degree. Like he got a lot of love when he was here. I mean, we tried to heap praise on him. But I think the fact that he went to Cincinnati as the Texans were falling from grace in Cincinnati for the first time in their modern football lives, splurged in free agency on 3 defensive players, actually, DJ Reeder and another couple of guys. And that was part of kind of turning them around. They draft Joe Burrow the next year, and then they're off to the races. And if it weren't for a snowy field in the playoffs, I think probably would have beat the Bills. But I don't know if DJ Reeder's coming back. Maybe he will, but it's just a dream for now. This is the one relevant thing, or one interesting thing I saw about the AFC South. Greg Cosell said a bunch of interesting things, and I've got the link to the Ross Tucker podcast in the description. You can watch this. Ross is a friend of mine, awesome dude, and does a lot of really, really good content. But he also has Greg Cosell on once a week. That's one of the good things he does. So this was Greg Cosell talking about Shane Steichen as the head coach in Indianapolis, coming from Philadelphia, where he did a lot of really cool things with Jalen Hurts, an athletic quarterback, much like Anthony Richardson is now. Here's him talking about what he thinks the Colts will do in regards to running an Eagles offense.
Charles Omenihu. But I think there'll be many of the same principles for sure, because we know with the Eagles offense that Hurts' is running ability when he's in the gun, which is probably 98% of the snaps, dictates how defenses have to line up and play. And that really creates opportunities not only in the run game, but in the pass game.
Yeah, so we know that Anthony Richardson might be a real son of a bitch, and much like Vince Young was in his rookie year, even as a rookie who wasn't a developed or accomplished passer yet, Vince Young took it to us and several other teams, garnering Rookie of the Year honors. So when it comes to a rookie who doesn't have any film on him yet, and I mean Anthony Richardson might very well develop into a really good passer, but he's raw right now. That's what you worry about. Shane Steichen knows what the hell he's doing with guys like that. Now, I do think Jalen Hurts he just had an established maturity and leadership quality to him, and he'd gone through some stuff, between starting in Alabama, getting benched in a national championship game, picking himself up off the turf and transferring to Oklahoma. Like, he's seen some stuff. He's the opposite of Anthony Richardson by modern football standards, because Anthony Richardson hasn't seen much at all in terms of experience. So he's got more seasoning, I think, to go through. So as far as Greg Cosell, what did we already know? That Greg confirmed. They're probably going to run a lot of San Francisco principles. It'd be really, really stupid if they hired Bobby Slowick, and it turns out that Bobby Slowick wanted to unleash the Bobby Slowick offense on the world. Bobby Slowick himself has seen a lot of stuff too. I mean, when he was at Pro Football Focus, one of the really intriguing things about that was he was in a position where he was basically reviewing film from every team in the league. So going through, working on the way Pro Football Focus analyzed things, teaching people at Pro Football Focus the way NFL coaches break things down. It was really pretty unique of a situation, because he'd been in the NFL already, and his dad had been an NFL coach. So he's seen and analyzed all 32 teams in the league multiple times, and probably watched more film than just about anybody else on earth in some respects. So I'm really intrigued by what his version of this offense might end up being. Tank Dell, Tank Dell, it might be, I feel like he's going to be the guy who's so much discussed as underrated or a dark horse that he actually becomes perhaps maybe a little bit overrated and our expectations become too much. I'm trying to think of him as like, hey, he's a rookie. He's going to show some flashes. Every time we see a flash, that's something you can build on. But I don't want to put the pressure on the kid to come in and at 165 pounds be putting up 110 catches right away. I won't complain about it if he does, but I don't want to put that pressure on him. Finding guys that can rush on the interior as well as defensive ends, I think Dylan Horton might actually be one of those guys too. Dylan Horton is the guy who I think people think Tank Dell is, in that Tank Dell is actually pretty well known. People know about Tank Dell. They've seen highlights of Tank Dell. It's not like Houston is a tiny school or anything. Whereas Horton has like been a little bit of a late bloomer and late to the party. I'm not saying that, obviously. I'm not saying that. Where is he on my depth chart? Where did they put him? You sons of bitches. This is it. You know what? They're almost always awesome with this. Oh, there he is, Dylan Horton. Okay. But I think Dylan Horton's a full-grown man. And like I said, it's not like he went to a small school, but he transferred and he didn't really come into his own until this year. So I think Dylan Horton will get his reps because they're going to rotate. So he doesn't need to be starting. He's going to get his reps and he can play inside. I know some of you are going to say, hey, Will Anderson can play inside too. He did in college. I don't want him. He's not that big. He can just plant himself right there outside the offensive tackle and do his work. We'll watch the Henry To'oTo'o here in a minute, but I want to answer some questions so I don't hurry on out of here. Oh, more suspensions coming league-wide for gambling. This is going to be it's going to be a big story. I hope it's not too big, because then there's going to have to be a cover-up. And I hate having to pretend like I'm angry about a cover-up, except when I'm actually happy to cover it. The classic revisionist history, I'm guessing you're talking about the way Dalton Schultz and Jimmy Ward have been handled. These scoundrels in the media. Somebody responded. You guys have been awesome with your comments, by the way, and very complimentary, and I appreciate it. There was a woman last night who lumped me in with the evil, hated mainstream media, and I was disappointed because she acted like I was just somebody that had no idea what it was like to be an NFL player, and which leads me to believe I have to give my resume out a little bit more on here, but it feels weird doing that. Like, Seth Payne had played in the NFL. I don't like it. I'd feel awkward about that. You guys can tell everybody. Yep. Thank you for that earlier. Stroud is a poor man's Deshaun Watson. Camp is already complaining about him being here. Who's Camp? He's already complaining. Is he already complaining? I don't know about that. Reader was a keeper at the time. Yeah, that was one, man. That might have been the first rift with Brian Gaine and Bill O'Brien, because I know, was that the offseason that Brian Gaine ended up getting fired? I know Brian Gaine at the time had been talking about figuring out a way to retain DJ Reader, and I think that like putting two and two together. I'm not reporting things other than that. I know that like Gaine was, concerned about being able to retain guys like DJ Reader. Well, I think Bill O'Brien was in hyperdrive mode, and I think that's when there started to be a rift. The rookie was left to learn Texas humidity is a killer, like JJ said, and traffic sucks, but food and nightlife are great. Oh, did I miss a quote out of camp today about somebody falling out or something? The undrafted Arizona running back the Texans signed. Any thoughts on him? Not yet. Valladay is it Valladay or Valladay? There's Mike Boone, who I've seen mentioned a couple times. I guess I don't know enough about Mike Boone. There's Darge Agumbawale is on the roster, which I'm enthralled about, because as much as I've been botching various names, I've got Agumbawale nailed. I need him to be on the roster. Remember, Lovey wouldn't even say his name because he wanted to call him Agumbo. He called him Dare all the time. So no, we should do Valladay and all of those other guys. I know I owe you a defensive line video too. So let's see. Horton reminds me of Antonio Smith. I could see that. Let's see. I have my wife take care of her if you want, Seth. Who was that lady? Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah, Valladay's underrated. Honestly, I'm getting a little paranoid now. I realized I started talking about quarterback mechanics a little bit, and I felt like, all right, wait a second. I'm venturing into territory where I'm a little out over my skis. I want to be careful when I'm talking about quarterback mechanics. I always like to be citing experts more so than talking about them myself. Other than I think there are times where you can just tell, like with CJ Stroud, he's just got a nice, crisp and clean delivery. And I've got clips of various other people talking about him. But that's I can't print one of these. All right, so here we go. This is Road to the Pros. It's a documentary made by the University of Alabama about Henry To'oTo'o and his road to the pros. I did a reaction to episode 1 the other day. I was very pleased with Henry To'oTo'o, but I am a little bit nervous because I've been painting kind of a narrative about this Texans offseason and really the past couple of years where, man, they really seem to be going for guys that have this commitment gene. Jalen Petrie could have bailed out of his commitment to Baylor after the Art Briles scandal, but he decided to stay when everybody else bailed, and he stayed through a coaching change. And in the end, he's a guy that he's glad that he stuck it out. D'Amico Ryans wants to come back home. And all these guys that have this commitment gene. And I watched the first episode of this show, and I thought it was awesome with Henry To'oTo'o. But then at the very end, you find out, okay, I thought he was going to go to Alabama, but he went to Tennessee right out of high school. Well, what happened? Because I think he got drafted out of Alabama. Well, this is what happened.
Athletic Director Fulmer and I agree that we have no choice but to move forward with terminating Coach Pruitt.
When I do my interviews with these coaches, they'll be like, "Hey man, what's like the hardest thing you've been through in life as a grown adult?" And I tell them like, leaving Tennessee was like definitely the hardest part. My phone was just blowing up so much. Like, we knew you were a traitor, like all along, like we knew who you are. You don't belong here. You don't belong to wear orange.
Yeah, traitor. Treacherous. He just up and left. I can tell you from experience. I thought about transferring my sophomore year, after my sophomore season, spring of my sophomore year. And I actually went and asked the coach to give me, I can't remember a release to go seek a potential transfer. And he shamed me. He guilted me into staying and made me feel awful about myself, like had me almost broken down in tears. And which I don't think is actually ethical or legal, but I had gone and I'd spoken to a coach at a Division I school before I had asked for the release, and somehow my coach found out about it because I was too dumb to realize that the head coach of that team was like a lifelong friend with my head coach. So I'd gone and talked to this Division I school's defensive line coach. The defensive line coach was like, "Hell yeah, we'll take you. Go get your release." And then he went and talked to his head coach, and that head coach told my head coach, and then he kind of forced me back into it. It's hard, man. It's hard transferring. And I didn't have a cell phone. I wouldn't have had throngs of people on my smartphone coming after me. But so he decides to transfer because Pruitt got fired. He wasn't happy with all of the stuff that was going on. And then this is when this University of Alabama produced documentary starts to feel like a really, really nice advertisement for anybody who might be considering transferring to the University of Alabama.
His understanding of concepts and being able to...
But first, this is one of his, to set the scene. He had spent 2 years starting at Tennessee, started a bunch of games his freshman year, really came into his own as a sophomore. And then one of his assistant coaches who was with him at Tennessee explains just why he's as good as he was.
Manipulate the defense through audibles and checks is really what sets him apart.
Yeah, so really bright kid, and that's what all the scouting reports say, and people gush over him. This is when the advertisement for the transfer portal really gets hot and heavy.
There was so many talks of movement happening with coaching staff and his staff. And I just felt that it was, at that time, it was unstable.
You're only 17, 18 years old.
Oh, wait. Woman arrested, charged in fire near Texas AG's office, Paxton says. I was recording this on my phone earlier. I didn't realize there was an alert. See, I missed the alert. I missed the news. I could have helped.
You come out of college, out of high school. So sometimes you make mistakes, sometimes you mess up. It gives them a different opportunity to be able to explore like different avenues. And that's what it gave me. Like it gave me a chance to be able to jump back on my 2 feet and right my wrongs. Being able to go back out again and like, okay, let's see what else I can do. Like I did this here, let me see what else I can do. Like sometimes things don't work for you, like, and it doesn't work out how you planned it. So I think it gives kids that opportunity to be able to find that plan that they were looking for.
It's and it fades to black there. That's like it felt like either maybe like a youth ministry, a church, or maybe a trade school, or someplace you can go, like a home for wayward children. After he and that was actually like several minutes of that. I started looking up. I Googled like Henry To'oTo'o, trouble with the law or anything like that, because he talked about getting in trouble. And the only thing that came up was Henry To'oTo'o, trouble for the offense. Yeah, he spells trouble. He's never been in trouble. He's talking there. He was talking about deciding to go to Tennessee like he had gotten somebody pregnant as a teenager or something, or that he had tried hardcore drugs or something. I think he was just talking about choosing to go to the University of Tennessee, but he figured out ways to right his wrongs, and he found the Church of Alabama.
But
Christian Harris, some of you know this, and he talked about this after he was drafted, but Christian Harris, who he knew his senior year in high school, is like his best bud in the world. So Christian Harris, who we were just talking about, will be his fellow linebacker here in Houston. But I got excited just about, I didn't know quite how close they were as friends.
He said and made a decision, like, after all of that it's like, okay, I'm going to just go to Bama. Like, that's what you need to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, that ain't a bad choice. Like, you can't go wrong with that. He was able to start, like, pretty fast. Like, he got a hang of it real quick. Like, and we played similar.
Like, imagine you're a kid thinking about transferring, and you watch this video, and you're like, oh, that's what I need to do. And I can right the wrongs of my past, and I'm going to start pretty soon.
Like, with our play styles, like, we even talk about it. We'll have the exact, like, we'll be side by side. Like Mike and Will, exact same steps. And we don't know how it's happening, but like we're thinking the same, we react the same. So that shit was cake. It was easy for him.
Alabama's like De La Salle.
De La Salle is his high school. And before he gets to that part, because that's really the cherry on top of this advertisement for how awesome it is to transfer to Alabama. But like, yeah, watch this footwork from these guys.
And that shit was cake. It was easy for him.
Alabama's like.
Oh, it didn't go all the way back. Sorry, guys. I really want to watch this footwork again. I get excited about it. So these two guys playing next to each other in lockstep.
Need to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, that ain't a bad choice. Like, you can't go wrong with that. He was able to start, like, pretty fast. Like, he got a hang of it real quick. Like, and we played similar, like, with our play styles. Like, we even talk about it. We'll have the exact, like, we'll be side by side. Like Mike and Will, exact same steps. And we don't know how it's happening, but like we're thinking the same, we react the same. So that shit was cake. It was easy for him.
Alabama's like De La Salle. Like, we're like this. Like, we're like brothers. Like,
they're brothers. I want to transfer to Alabama now. I want to go get yelled at by Saban. They said I know every generation says this, but even the younger guys at Alabama will say, yeah, we know it's not as bad as it used to be. That fourth quarter workout that they do in the spring and everything, it's not as bad as it used to be. Which reminds me, let me tell you a quick story. This is a Tom Coughlin college story. Don't worry, I'm not telling any non-Texans NFL stories anymore. But the Tom Coughlin, I remember this guy I know, Tom McManus, was at Boston College when Coughlin showed up, and Coughlin walked in, And man, I don't want to get the story wrong, but basically walked in after he had just been hired, and they were all in the middle of a workout, an off-season workout at Boston College, and walked in and without even saying hello to anybody or anything, just started screaming and yelling at everybody, yelling at some guy was puking in a barrel and coughing, was telling him he was soft, like hardcore stuff. And those are the kinds of stories you would hear about Saban too. And that just that does not fly anymore. And it doesn't happen. So Alabama, like this, where I did get genuinely excited is I think that like these guys both are guys who respond to that. I do like when you sometimes guys in college, guys in the NFL that came from programs where they actually had that really tight knit feel to it. I don't know if a lot of you guys you'll remember Jay Foreman, the linebacker from the first couple years here. He was a Nebraska linebacker, and from back when like Nebraska had badass defenses, and the stories he would tell about college and just how psychotic those guys were on defense. It creates a different type of guy, as like a special type of guy. So, and Foreman was a guy that played way above his combine numbers and all of that. So Christian Harris, awesome friend. University of Alabama, you can right all your wrongs. You can undo the past. You can finally make your parents proud if you just enter the transfer portal and go to Alabama. But these guys are like, I can't not emphasize to you enough how tight these guys are.
Everywhere Christian went, I went. Everywhere I went, Christian went. But like we were together everywhere we went. We rode together to class. Like he was a guy that like when I get married, like he's gonna be in my line. And I know if he gets married, like I'm gonna be in his line. So
there's the commitment I was looking for. Remember I was nervous. Oh, by the way, I'm not a beer snob. I saw somebody say that. It's I'm trying out this. My wife got this for me at like some grocery store near her parents' house, it's gluten-free beer. It's not bad. It's called Glutenberg, which I don't know. It's stupid. So I thought they make it look like a German beer. I do better without the gluten. I'm not ashamed. I don't avoid it completely, but I do better without the gluten. So what were we talking about with these guys? I got crushed on the I got stuck on the gluten. Let me rewind this.
And I know if he gets married, like I'm gonna be in his line. So
okay. At no point when I was a senior in college did I ever think, man, this guy is a really good friend of mine. Someday when I get married, he's gonna stand in my line. Like it wasn't like nowhere close to it. So as you know, and as Henry's father talked about in episode 1, and as I know from various Polynesian guys that I know, man, family is very, very important, and it is not taken lightly. Which I know sounds like a basic thing, but whatever. And I think I think my senior year in college, it was more of like, bros before hoes, and we're never getting married. We're going to be like whoever George Clooney was at the time. We didn't really know George Clooney was going to turn into this legendary bachelor who one day forsook his friends, except for the ones that could help him with his tequila company. So they're very, very tight. They're buds. He's got the commitment gene. And this is the thing that really sealed it was they don't win the national championship a couple years ago. You guys know that. It was very devastating. And then they lose to Georgia 33-18. My God, do you even quarterback? 18 points.
You're a winner or you're a loser. Like that's the two options you have. Like that's how I always look at things. You either win or you lose. So like I'm not saying that season was a fail, but like that season was not what I wanted, what we wanted. Like that was not it.
Yeah, so they lost that. Christian Harris talked about that for a while. That's very good. Also, there is a part in here where, and I don't mean to, it just wasn't all that related to the football side of things, but there is a part in here where his father basically does a holy oil treatment on him to help remedy some ailment that he has. When they talk about his faith a little bit, I didn't want people to think I was like just trying to wash over the whole faith side of it. The faith is very important to him and his family. So if that intrigues you, go click on the link and go watch.
Like, of course, the fans expect you to win.
Okay, so they lose that. They lose. They don't win the national championship. The fans have high expectations, and obviously there's always that pressure there. So I felt like this was interesting just from NFL players' perspective, and it relates to C.J. Stroud a little bit too.
Not it. Like, of course, the fans expect you to win. Like, they expect you to win. Like, you play for Alabama, you're supposed to win. Like, but it doesn't come easy like that. Our coaching staff does a great job of making sure you're not paying attention to that. You just try to work your tail off every single day.
So all that, and that's something that Saban talks about a lot, is the process. You've got your ultimate goals, but you're working on that day. What's the goal right in front of you? All that stuff. I mean, these guys, I'm joking about Alabama being a cult and everything, but the guys that come out of Alabama, and going back to Kareem Jackson, and they just, you don't have to worry about them as much on average as you got to worry about other guys. They've been through that process. And I think now, especially the guys that stick it out at Alabama and could transfer if they wanted to, or if they're not starting or what have you, they've passed a screening test that not necessarily everybody else has. That doesn't mean that they're awesome automatically or anything. It's just it's a cool little screening for them. Now, the other part when it comes to the commitment part was this year when Alabama was out of the playoffs. How would guys like Henry To'oTo'o react and respond to playing in a quote-unquote meaningless bowl game?
At this time, there was people talking to us and giving us advice like Henry shouldn't play. But then that totally went against the character who Henry is.
Man, you come to Alabama like you'll be wrong to not play in any game that's presented in front of you.
Yeah, it would be wrong to not play in any game that's presented in front of you.
Because we were hot. We were pissed that we weren't in the playoffs. Pissed. That last game, I ain't never gonna miss a game. You put a game on the schedule, I'm gonna be there.
So I feel he has enough of the commitment gene. I'm okay with him transferring away from Tennessee. I feel like they were up to no good there at Tennessee. Obviously, horrible decision to ever change anything there. It wasn't going to work out for him. But this very last part, one thing I'm really starting to appreciate in these documentaries, in these episodes, is that To'oTo'o's dad, Mr. To'oTo'o, is he's very eloquent. He's poetic almost.
What type of person are you? Can you handle it? Can you fight through it? Can you get back up when you fall down, kind of thing? And that was what Alabama was able to reinstill into my son that he might have forgot.
Look at that.
I would think since Sloa came from...
Not you, Greg. You're a poet in your own right. Don't get me wrong. But that was beautiful. And but again, what was he atoning for? Was it not committing to Alabama in the first place? To reinstill. The other thing I wanted to point out here too was, man, look at that NIL money. Those are those Apple AirPod Maxes, aren't they? I do not like the looks of those things, but I know they're badass, and I know they cost $600. That's not what the kids in the pre-NIL days, at least not kids who came from families with 8 siblings who kind of grew up, of very modest means. They weren't rocking those things back before the NIL days, unless they're either a running back, a quarterback, or a wide receiver, or a genuine stud defensive player of the year type, where the alumni were handing him out like candy.
Are you? Can you handle it? Can you fight through it? Can you get back up when you fall down, kind of thing? And that was what Alabama was able to reinstill into my son that he...
To reinstill into my son.
He might have forgot.
He might have forgotten it. Did I miss something? Maybe I didn't do as exhaustive a search as I needed to on any potential issues or anything that To'oTo'o had. But it sounded like he was awesome at Tennessee. And then they had a coaching change and he transferred to Alabama and he was awesome there. So I haven't seen you guys point anything out. And I know there's a healthy argument going on here about Davis Mills and everybody else. I can't unsort all of that right now. Let's see, Herb, Watson, Lamar, Mac Jones. Many rookies have solid seasons. Can't really compare to Mahomes because we don't have an Alex Smith starter type. Just don't think Davis has that X factor to him. I would imagine that you're not comparing Mills to Mahomes, and I say that as no slight to Davis Mills whatsoever, but more as a nod to sanity. So I don't know exactly what that was about. Let training camp decide. There's no reason to rush CJ. He is the future. We went over this morning the recent stats since 2011 of the 16 quarterbacks who have gone in the top 4. And I'll fact check myself on this later. This is off the top of my head. I think there have been 16 picks who have gone in the top 4 since 2011, and 11 of those 16 have started in the first 5 weeks. I want to say 11 have started in week 1, and like 13 overall, or 14 have started at some point that season before the midpoint, and then only a couple guys didn't start at all. So it's more likely than not that CJ Stroud will start week 1, but it's not the end of the world. Now, Pat Mahomes obviously was a different scenario. Baker Mayfield didn't. A couple other people didn't, but I'm not overly concerned about it as long as I played those clips from Bobby Slowick yesterday that talk about how there's a process step by step by step, and they can kind of monitor guys' progress in a way that I think that most coaches don't have it as systematic. I think there's a lot of installing the offense, but kind of just hoping guys figure it out as you go. With the with the Texans, but the way it was done with the 49ers, as I understand it, it is very much a systematic approach where you're mastering one skill, then moving up to the next skill, then moving up to the next skill, and it's all tied together. But until you get proficient to a certain level, they don't want to throw you out there. So I think a lot of it really is up to just CJ Stroud. How well does he learn these lessons, and how well does he progress through training camp? Herm Edwards said something today. Herm Edwards comes up with some nuggets of wisdom at times. And one of them was, whenever he had a situation like this with a veteran quarterback competing with a rookie quarterback, he said, look, it's a competition, but you better not be even, because if it's even, the young guy's winning. Like, that's a rule for any position. And it's usually in reality, if it's a rookie and he's almost up to you, that's close enough to even, because he's already demonstrated that he's got potentially something more than you do. If you've got 2 years of experience as Davis Mills, and this rookie is nipping at your heels after just a few weeks, that's even, And it's just like with pass coverage. If he's even, he's leaving. That's what it is in competitions in the NFL, because younger is cheaper, is better, is more upside, is all those things. So Davis Mills will have a chance to compete, but he's got to be better than even with CJ Stroud. The first hint or sign they have that CJ Stroud can go out there and protect himself and be confident enough that he's not going to damage himself, he's going to be out there. So, which I think is the right way to do it. Let's see. Was mistaken for a gang member. Yeah, that's in episode 1. He was mistaken for a gang member, shot 5 times. 30 rounds were shot into the car, which I never lack in astonishment at how bad a shot some people are without proper training, and thank God for that, because let's see. Sorry, we've been debating starting Stroud as rookie versus sitting for a year. Oh God, no, not a year. Not a year. No, not a year. I don't think a year. Not a year. Not a year. And I saw Alex Smith referenced a few times. I think that Alex Smith is a different case. He's a better quarterback than, I would take Alex Smith. I would take Alex Smith over Garoppolo. Am I alone in that? I don't think I'm alone in that, right? That feels like that would be the consensus opinion. Alex Smith was steadier throughout his career. I know he was he was way more durable until JJ snapped his leg. That was rough. What's cool about that? You know what's crazy about that? JJ was talking about that. I want to say it was one of the times he was on Pardon My Take, and he didn't even realize he had done it. He didn't know that he was the one that had injured Alex Smith until much later, which it does make me believe that a lot of guys are way better at ignoring the media noise than you realize, because I don't know how he would have. I don't know how he would have. I understand how he might not have known it in the moment, but the way he told it, I think like he didn't know that he was the one that snapped Alex Smith's leg until long after the fact. So I don't know. I wonder if he felt bad about then. If that were the case, then he wouldn't have called him, or he might just not be remembering that properly. You know, one thing that happens if you have an undiagnosed concussion, I discovered this. I realized this years later after I was done playing football, when we started to learn that, like, like all those times where I saw stars and couldn't remember a few plays, that was actually a concussion. Cool. So sometimes when that would happen during the season, you kind of have gaps in your memory, and things would happen during the season where I always thought maybe it was just because I was tired or something. But like I left my truck running all night one night. I would get up early and then leave in the morning, and my wife would get up and she'd go into the kitchen, and the milk would be in the cupboard and the cereal would be in the refrigerator. There were just stuff like that constantly. Or like I'd come in and I'd be trying to look at the overhead projector. We had those back then. And like Kylie Wong would be next to me. I'd be like, Kylie, is the overhead projector blurry? What's going on? She's like, no, what the hell are you talking about, Seth? It's crystal clear. Like, I don't know, I just need some coffee or something. So that's my story about Alex Smith and why Alex Smith is not the same as Davis Mills. Alex Smith, when Mahomes was a rookie, I'd probably take him over Derek Carr too. Yeah. That year for Alex Smith in Washington is what America is all about. If you haven't watched that story and you want to vomit and cry, I do. I want to vomit and cry. That's awesome. All right. I'm going to get going. I've got like 6 of these that I wanted to chop up. I like doing the live streams. Moving forward, I'm going to do it like this as much as I can. I'm going to do the live streams so I can just screw up and interact and everything. But I do want to, because a lot of people only, like their YouTube videos in 5, 10, and 15-minute nuggets. I'll chop them up and put them out as standalone videos. So if you see one of those and it looks like a topic I've already covered, don't abuse yourself by attempting to watch it a second time. But I do appreciate you watching now. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and please like. Just to take you like a 16th of a second to do. And also tell a friend about A, the Seth Payne Show on YouTube, and B, the Alabama transfer portal. It's saving lives, rectifying wrong.